The Super Nintendo was special to me. It wasn't the first console I owned, that was the NES, but along with my Game Boys, the Super Nintendo is what formed my childhood love of video games. Unfortunately, I don't have the original console anymore. Thanks to my mom's never ending quest to give away my childhood stuff, it's long gone. I'm an adult now, and the days of being a kid and sitting in front of an old CRT TV playing Super Nintendo are long gone. But the memories of the games I played are still very much present, and nowadays we have a huge selection of handhelds that can play all these games. So in today's video, we're not really going to review a handheld. Instead, I want to share with you 10 Super Nintendo games I think everybody needs to play. Limiting a list to 10 is hard because the Super Nintendo library is awesome, but for the sake of not making a 5-hour long video, I'm just going to keep it to 10. The first 8 are in no particular order, so don't think just because one is ahead of the other, that means it's going to be a better game. But 1 and 2 are going to be in order, and in my opinion, those are the best games on the system. So with that being said, let's get started with that list. Secret of Mana is an action RPG that means real-time combat mixed with traditional RPG elements. It's a sequel to Final Fantasy Adventures for the Game Boy, and it's the first game in the series to get away from using the Final Fantasy name. On the surface, the plot sounds like a traditional JRPG story. It starts with some village kids playing somewhere they shouldn't be. One of them finds an ancient sword, pulls it from the stone, a huge monster shows up, and of course, the young child has to save them. They of course respond by kicking the poor orphan child out of the village, and that's when your grand adventure actually begins. This is clearly a huge oversimplification of the game's actual plot, but I would say the story isn't the main selling point here. Like all great games, it's a combination of elements that makes the adventure worth experiencing. Great music, a beautiful colorful world, fast, maybe not always smooth combat, which by the way, that combat system revolves around a stamina bar that gets depleted every time you attack, so you can't just hack away or you're going to end up unalive pretty fast. It is crucial to be able to give time for that bar to fill up and land maximum damage. You also get to travel the overworld by being shot out of a cannon, so that's pretty cool. I was late to the party on this one, and I wish I would have found that as a kid because this is the type of game I would have loved back then. If you want to experience one of the best action RPGs in the system, you have to give Secret of Mana a try. This one inspired a lot of what came after it, so it's a pretty important game, and if you're a fan of some of those other games with the same style, you kind of owe it to yourself to give the original one a try. Known as Dragon Warrior 3 in North America and Europe, we never actually got the Super Nintendo version in the West, but the impact of Dragon Quest was global and it's still felt today in modern JRPGs. Luckily there's a fans translation, so language won't be a barrier to enjoying this great classic. Dragon Quest basically created JRPGs and laid the blueprint for what epic adventures should be on a home console. Simply put, Dragon Quest 3 is one of the best JRPGs ever made. To really appreciate all the details, you should probably play the first two, which also have fan translations available, but I think this game is good enough to stand on its own even if you don't play them. Usually Dragon Quest games come in sets of 3, but I found that even if you don't play those, the story is strong enough to stand on its own. Speaking of that story, it's epic, the world is huge, the music is iconic, and the art is beautiful thanks to Akira Toriyama being the lead designer for the series. As far as gameplay, it's classic turn-based combat. You build up your party from a selection of characters with different classes you recruit at a tavern, level them up, buy weapons and armor, and explore a huge world made of different continents and islands and battle monsters as you try to save everybody. I didn't actually get to play this game as a kid. I did play the original Dragon Warrior on my Game Boy, but I never knew there was a remake for the Super Nintendo until I was older and had access to the internet. So for me, emulation was the way I experienced this game, and in my opinion, it's the best way to play it thanks to the ability to fast forward and use experience cheats. I know that's not the traditional experience, but Dragon Quest games are grind heavy, and being able to cut down on that really lets you enjoy the story. Just because we weren't able to do that as kids doesn't mean we can't do it nowadays, and let's be honest, nobody has the time to put in hours and hours of grinding, and if you want to play an RPG game, use those cheats. If you want to experience Dragon Quest and you're looking for the perfect place to start, go with the Super Nintendo games. Earthbound is an insane adventure in the most wonderful sense. It's a traditional JRPG all the way, but at the same time it does its own thing. The story is completely crazy. Set in the year 1990X, it starts with a magic space beast from the future telling you you're the chosen one and have to save the world from an evil alien along with 3 other kids. The beast then gets killed shortly after. You then go on an adventure where you'll meet your new friends and see crazy cults, obvious references to extremely shady things, zombies, and so much more. Overall, Earthbound is a hard game to explain if you don't have any context for what it's trying to do. The game can be summarized in overworld exploration with turn-based combat, but that's seriously selling it short. As you progress, you build up a party of awesome characters, you level them up, upgrade your equipment, and use psychic abilities to battle enemies. You know, the usual stuff. But don't mistake it for just another run-of-the-mill role-playing game because the experience and style of Earthbound is something games are still trying to recreate. My favorite mechanic is insta-kill for lower-level enemies and auto-fighting, which basically eliminates a tedious grinding process that, unfortunately, a lot of JRPGs suffer from. Enemies are also visible in the overworld, so avoiding them when you have things to do is a lot easier, but some of them will chase you, so escaping isn't always an option. The mechanics are solid, the art style is unique, the characters are memorable, and the game is a mixture of the Goonies, the Explorer, and Dragon Quest. I'm glad I found this game as an adult because I feel like I was able to appreciate it a lot more than if I would have played this back when I was a kid. To a lot of fans, Final Fantasy VI is the best installment in the series, and that's saying a lot considering there are 16 mainline titles and 136 total games. But the characters, mature tone, and unforgettable villain paired with some of the best artwork on the Super Nintendo makes this not just a game but a story that needs to be experienced. The game uses an active turn-based system with a gauge that measures when a party member can attack. You have a total of 14 characters you can build your party from, and you can interchange them almost anytime. Besides character selection, you can change how your party functions by equipping characters with different magic side and gear. Each character has a specific talent, but you can pretty much stick to the ones you like the most since the game is pretty good about keeping things level between each party member. As long as you equip the right gear, you should be fine. But while the gameplay is great, it's really the story that makes this game stand out and continue to be spoken of in such high regard. Individual development and mature tone really lets you get invested in the characters you meet. Final Fantasy is a name that even people that don't play video games know. And arguably one of the best installments in the series, if not the best, is on the Super Nintendo. So if you've been waiting for the right time to play this legendary game, consider this your wake-up call. The Ted Wasley translation is widely considered the best version for the Super Nintendo, so I would recommend tracking that one down, but really whatever version you play, whether it's a translation version 6 or the original North American Final Fantasy 3, you're in for a good time. If you only play one RPG on the list, just play Chrono Trigger. This isn't just one of the best RPGs ever made, it's one of the best games period. I think almost anyone that's actually played this game can agree on that. Chrono Trigger just gets everything right. Combat system, game pace, character development, no random encounters, storytelling, multiple endings, it's all balanced and just flows in a natural way. The game was made by a dream team of RPG developers, Hironobu Sakaguchi, who created Final Fantasy, Joichi Hori, who created Dragon Quest, Akira Toriyama did the character design, and Yasunori Matsuda and Nobuo Uematsu composed the soundtrack. Few games can say they've had a development team with that much talent and experience in their genre. Chrono Trigger is a masterpiece that actually gets time travel right. That alone is a massive accomplishment. But its characters and the way time just melts away when you turn the game on is what really makes it an experience worth having. World exploration consists of a huge overworld that changes depending on the time period, and smaller, more detailed areas or dungeons with visible enemies. The game uses an active turn-based combat system that lets you combine party member attacks into more powerful ones called techs, and you can equip different items and weapons to power them up. You have up to 6 characters to choose from to build a party of 4, but even characters that aren't in your party gain experience points, so switching them never feels like a bad move. It never feels like the solution to an enemy is just to grind and level up, it's more about strategy and attack combination. That lets the story flow a lot more naturally, and it makes me wish a lot more RPGs from back in the day did it that way. The story is epic, it takes you across time, you'll meet lovable characters, battle memorable villains, and make unlikely allies. This is one of those games I keep wanting to go back to, and I know I'm going to be playing it for years to come. So if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, now's a good time to pick it up. You just can't have a Nintendo list without a Mario game. Up until Mario Wonder, some people were actually arguing that Super Mario World was the best 2D Mario game ever made. I guess some people still do, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but you know how retro gamers are. Super Mario World introduced Yoshi, the Cave Feather, and the ability to store power-ups. Two of those became permanent staples in the series. So if you still haven't played Super Mario World, you really owe it to yourself to give the game a go. The idea is very simple, and I'm sure everyone knows what a 2D Mario game is like, but in case you don't, I'll explain. You run from point A to point B, collect power-ups, ride Yoshi, and jump on enemies along the way while you try to find the princess. Very straightforward, but it's the way Nintendo changes things up on you and keeps things feeling fresh that makes the game special. Whether you're trying to dodge Hammer Bros, storming a castle to stomp another Koopa, getting lost in a haunted house, or finding a key to a special world, you're guaranteed to have a good time. No one thing ever overstays its welcome, and the difficulty curve in my opinion is great for anyone of any age. The game is just a joy to play from World 1-1 all the way to the final showdown with Bowser. It's simple, fun, and challenging, a perfect game to just pick up and enjoy without having to worry about inventory, story plot, any of that. It's just a good time. As crazy as it sounds, there was a time when Castlevania was a very linear game, and this is probably the best non-Metroidvania Castlevania game. Super Castlevania 4 is a spiritual remake of the first Castlevania game for the NES. Originally, the game was supposed to take place in modern times, but the idea was abandoned in development. If Super Mario World isn't really your thing, then maybe Super Castlevania will be more your style. It's basically the complete opposite of Super Mario World, while still being a side-scrolling platformer. The setting is dark, the movement is slow, and Simon feels like a heavy bag of bricks. But somehow it feels good to play. The lack of fluid movement doesn't really feel like a limitation, it's more like a tank slowly mowing down enemies. It's a lot like Doom in a sense that it feels like enemies are trapped in that castle with you instead of you with them. Your main weapon is a whip that can attack in 8 directions, block projectiles, and be used as a rope to swing across areas that are too far to jump to. The game has 11 levels, you get 5 lives to make it to the end. It's definitely an old school mechanic, but it just makes it feel more rewarding when you actually finish it. Or, you just use save states and cheat, who am I to judge? The art style is great, and the use of Home 7 really makes the levels feel alive. There's an uncensored ROM hack that I would recommend you play since it restores a lot of what the original team had in mind for the game. If you've never played an old school Castlevania game and don't really want to go back to the NES versions, this is the perfect place to start. There aren't a whole lot of non-Metroidvania games in this series, but the ones that are available are a great time. If you grew up watching The Terminator, Rambo, Predator, or any of those cinematic masterpieces in the 80s and 90s and you still haven't played Contra 3, I need you to do 2 things. First, don't forget to get your yearly physical, and second, go play Contra 3 right now and keep this video playing in the background. Contra 3 is non-stop action from the minute the game starts. Projectiles will fly at you from every direction, swarms of enemies will fill the screens, things will constantly be exploding everywhere, and you're going to fight giant aliens. The game is a mixture of side-scrolling levels mixed with overhead stages where you'll be able to pick up different weapons along the way, from spread guns to lasers and flamethrowers. The only goal is to make it from point A to point B, survive, and destroy everything in your way. You're going to die a lot. Seriously, you're going to die a lot. It wouldn't be a Contra game if you didn't. So don't be afraid to use the Konami code A, B, right, left, down, down, up on the title screen to get those extra 3 lives. And if you're really bad, you can also use some exploits and save states. The game isn't going to take it easy on you, so don't worry about using stuff like that. It's all fair play. Besides, before you know it, you're going to be able to make it through every stage like a pro, so In the end, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're enjoying it and you're experiencing this action-packed title, it's going to be a good time. I haven't finished this game, so I can't officially put it on the list, but it's probably going to make it pretty soon. But I will recommend it just based off what everybody says. I know it's a great game. This is the game that gave us Paper Mario, and I know it's influential, but I haven't finished it. So for now, it's going to be on the honorable mentions. Look, I love Donkey Kong Country, but it can be infuriating thanks to its "screw you, you're dead, so rent it again" from Blockbuster mechanics. It's still one I go back to regularly, and I think everybody should try it at some point, but it's hard to put it in a must-play list because of how broken the game can be. I love 2D Metroid. There's just something special about this franchise. Super Metroid is a game that has to be experienced to be understood. The feeling of isolation, the exploration, the music, the way Samus powers up as you dive deeper into the planet, it's almost a perfect game in my opinion. That doesn't mean it doesn't have flaws. Some of the mechanics have been improved in later games, the movement is almost floaty, and some areas can be a pain to navigate. But the high points are so good that it's easy to forget those shortcomings. The setting gives you a feeling of loneliness on a dark, dangerous alien planet full of things that want to kill you. The mixture of music and silence makes every area feel cavernous and huge. The colors are somehow dark but vibrant at the same time, and every area has a distinct look. It's as close as a Nintendo game can get to being scary. But you never feel powerless. Enemies are just an obstacle that needs to be dealt with as you blast everything in your way to finish the mission. The defining element of Super Metroid is exploration. As you gain more power, the map reveals itself to you and you advance further into the solitary planet. You're gonna get lost, you're gonna backtrack, and you're gonna get frustrated. But just when you start feeling like you want to quit, the way to advance pops up and the game pulls you right back in and gives you a sense of accomplishment. It's not a long game. Even for our first playthrough, you can knock it out under 8 hours, but it's one that really sticks with you. If you've never played a 2D Metroid game, don't put it off. I promise you it's going to be worth the time you put into it. If you decide to emulate this game, make sure you turn on Run Ahead. It can help with those tricky wall jumps, and check out Metroid Redux. It's a ROM hack that has some quality of life improvements. Or just play the original. Either way, you can't really go wrong with this game. Zelda is my favorite video game franchise. I've played every game in the series and I've loved most of them. The game became the blueprint for both 2D and 3D Zelda titles all the way up to Breath of the Wild. It took the game in a more story-driven direction and introduced the iconic Master Sword. It was the first Super Nintendo game I remember owning, and the feeling of exploration was amazing. The world felt huge and the story was epic. The art style is beautiful and colorful, movement feels fluid, and exploration of the overworld always felt rewarding. Zelda is an action-adventure game, so you won't see traditional level-up system, but the sense of powering up is very much present as you feel Link becomes stronger after every dungeon. While combat can be a little frustrating at times due to the limitation of the sword swing, the variety in ways to approach it keeps it feeling engaging. Zelda games are known for great dungeons and puzzles, and A Link to the Past doesn't disappoint. With a total of 13 dungeons, it has the most in the series. Between 2 overworlds and 13 dungeons, the game has a lot to see, but it never feels like it's dragging on, and there's always something to find behind a rock or under a bridge. Just like other games on this list, there's a group of fans that say this is their favorite game in the franchise. Well, that's not the case for me. I still hold it in very high regard and can see why somebody would say that. It's one of the most influential games ever made, and while I might be biased, I think this is the best game on the system. There are a few hacks of this game with quality of life improvements and color correction, but there's really no wrong way to play it. So if you haven't, now's the perfect time to play it, and if you already did, it might be time to jump back into Hyrule. Hopefully this video gave you some inspiration to play some awesome retro games. We'll be making more of these lists in the future, but I think for now you should be pretty busy. If there's any games on the Super Nintendo you think people have to play that I left out, go ahead and leave them down in the comments. I would love to see what y'all recommend. And if this is the first time watching one of our videos, go ahead and check out some of our other stuff. It's 3 of us on the channel, so I'm sure you'll find something you'll love. We have an awesome Discord as well if you want to come hang out, and we also have a website if you want to stay up to date with all the news and all the latest and greatest things happening in the world of retro handhelds. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.